a AP Lit, and I'm going to give you three poems that are stapled, so it's 2 pages, front and back. Let me hand this to you. These are modern, so we've read a lot of romantic, a lot of John Donne, a lot of, I'm going to say old English, that's the wrong term, of course, but a lot of English poetry from the 19th century. We hear a couple of 20th century writers, 3 of them, as a matter of fact. Turn to the very back page of this whole thing. Does this look familiar? I thought I went over this with you. I'm not sure. Sometimes these things get confused, but it's kind of a confusing acronym. It's everything about it. It's not everything about it I think is helpful, but it's here, and it's another one. You have an acronym we've used, I think, help successfully lead. That's for anything, but particularly prose, low and high diction, elevated or low and elevated diction, abstract and concrete, denotation, connotation. So that's helpful with prose and poetry. This is particularly supposed to be helpful with poetry. It's just somebody made this up, but it has some value. So I'd like for you to take a look at it. We're going to practice it. I mean, these are not formulas. There's nothing new about any of this. It's just a way to do what I've been trying to encourage you to do with this poetry. And so take a look at it. Two of the times, let's see, which one is it? Deal with the title. And I guess the idea there is that you don't know what the poem's about, so you see the title. I've always told you, remember the essay we wrote, Convergence of the Twain, pay attention to it. The prompt even asked you to speak of the title. This particular poem, this first poem, is going to be essential to know the title. So you look at the title once, and then when you've read it and studied it a little bit, that title may take on different meanings. So look at it again. Paraphrase. Maybe I misunderstand paraphrase. Paraphrase to me, it's a word by word, line by line rewording of the poem. I don't know that anybody has time for that. If we're thinking about a 40-minute essay, and you don't have time to do that. What maybe we should change it to is summarize. Maybe that would be a better way to put it. And I think we do that, and maybe you paraphrase it mentally, that you just unconsciously putting it in your own words, trying to figure out what it means. I think the point there is, do you know what the poem actually says? All right? You're not interpreting the meaning of it right now. You're just looking at what is it saying, what's going on in the poem. And then we know about connotation, and we know about attitude or tone. This is going to be unreadable here in a minute, I can tell already. And so that leaves the F. To me, this is sort of like a football play. This one is actually helpful to me, very helpful, is look for shifts. And I love that because, you see it in sonnets, you see the problem and then a shift to the solution. I hope you don't forget that. I hope you remember that's supposed to help you understand a sonnet. So the problem, what's the solution? What issue, whatever you want to call it, and a response to it. But there's a shift in the poem. I remember the shift in that, what was his name? It was the guy who's walking down the street and he sees his girlfriend and he says, "How you doing?" He's, no harm, no big deal. He plays it off, and then later there's a shift to the last 4 lines where he talks about love at the deathbed or in its deathbed, and then you have people come in and they're all allegorized, and so it's like 2 different poems, but there's a clear shift. I think that's a helpful tool if you remember these tools. So I think that may be the most important thing, and of course, this is the theme what's the poem about? But that all of this is leading up to what does it mean? It could be a poem about love. That's its theme, but that's not the meaning of the poem. The poem is the particular idea, the particular point that the author is trying to make about it. So, what I'd like to do is read this first poem together and do it together. Go through this together. And of the three, I think I picked the two most interesting ones. The one in the middle is interesting too, the one called Digging. But I would like to read this to you. Do we have any baseball players here? Well, the baseball players will appreciate this because it's about baseball. Can I ask you? There's no. Usually, this is not a factor, but you remember. When you read a poem, you need to know everything there is to know about the poem, right? No matter how small, what detectives say, there's no information you can give us that's too small or too insignificant. Like if a detective is on a case, even the smallest, most insignificant thing to you and me might mean something to the detective. Look at the writer of the poem. Never heard of him, just a regular guy. I say that. He must be a poet, but notice the name. See the name? Do I see the name? I'm talking about how I learned English. All right, that's the title. I'm not seeing any nods. I'm assuming you see the name, all right? Let me read it to you, and let's walk through it. It was an empty lot, ringed by elms, fir, and honeysuckle. Bill Corson was pitching in his buckskin jacket. Chuck Keller, fat even as a boy, was on first, his T-shirt riding up over his gut. Ron O'Neill, Jim Dennis were talking it up in the field, a blue sky above them tipped with cirrus. And there I was, just off the plain and plopped in the middle of Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and the neighborhood game, unnatural and without any moves. My notion of baseball in America growing fuzzier each time I whiffed. So it was not impossible that I, banished to the outfield and daydreaming of water or a hotel in the mountains, would suddenly find myself in the path of a ball stung by Joe Baroni. I watched it closing in, clean and untouched, transfixed by its easy arc, before it hit my forehead with a thud. I fell back, dazed, clutching my brow, groaning, "Oh, my shin, oh, my shin." And everybody peeled away from me and dropped from laughter, and there we were, all of us, writhing on the ground for one reason or another. Someone said shin again. There was a wild stamping of hands on the ground, a kicking of feet, and the fit of laughter overtook me too. And that was important, as important as Joe Baroni asking me how I was through his tears, picking me up, dusting me off with hands like swatters. And though my head felt heavy, I played on till dark, till dusk, missing flies and pop-ups and grounders, and calling out in desperation things like yours, and take it, but doing all right, tugging at my cap in just the right way, crouching low, my feet set, hum baby, sweetly on my lips. Read it again, and just note anything, and then we'll go back through and kind of apply. I'll kind of erase that, make it make sense. Go back and read it again. And get your pencil out, because that's part of your tool. We have to use our time wisely. So. we've done this with prose. It's not that much different. You're looking for words, you're looking for, you kind of have an idea, you look what to look for. You look for the diction, which are the words, interesting words. You're trying to connect title and events. Would anybody like to tell me what the poem is about and what happens in it? Who are the characters in it? It tells a little story, at least a little thing. I'll give you another minute. Yeah, I'll give you another minute. Clay said he'd start for us. I think it is significant that you write something in. I think that's some of you do it all in your head. I understand that. At least it feels like you do. But I think having notes when you're in the middle of a paper, I always like to have things to go back to. I cannot remember everything I thought when I went through the first time. So let Clay start for us and tell us what you know about the point. Again, I'd like to at some point establish the setting, the action, the characters, but whatever you want to say.
So you have this kid who is in a baseball game, and he says that he's just come from, or he's just off the plane, which I assume to mean that he's from another country.
Okay.
And you have Ben Corson, Chuck Keller, Len O'Neill, and Jem Dennis are all in the field on his team. And you have Joe Barone is hitting right now, and this kid is not paying attention at all. He's daydreaming, and Joe Barone hits a ball, and it hits him in the forehead, and he doesn't speak English so well. So he says, "Oh my shin," which the other kids find that funny, and I guess that is how he learned English.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? The title is, everything in it's about baseball, but the title is How I Learned English. So, thank you. Anything else just in general terms right now? You notice where this takes place, a specific place?
Pennsylvania.
Not just Pennsylvania.
Williamsport.
What's interesting about Williamsport? Isn't that where they hold the Little League World Series every year? I'll check it. That would be ironic if it is. All right, so tell me what do you think's going on here? The title, you mentioned the title. We've sort of paraphrased or summarized. So we need to look at the other aspects of it, which are the connotation, attitude, shifts, and theme. Jessica, what do you think? Anything you know? And you don't have to mention any of those things specifically, but.
No. Let's see. It kind of shifts from, so like the kid doesn't really know too much, like throughout the majority of it, but then when you get down to the last one, you like
Last what?
stanza,
Right.
kind of. It says they were laughing at him, and at that point you would think that you'd kind of be like, kind of mad or like sort
And what did he do? You said they were laughing at him, but what did he do?
He got up and like.
What else did he do? And he said, and that was important.
I'm not sure.
Anybody notice what he did? Yes.
He started laughing too because it was more important that they thought it was funny. He made a good impression than him actually getting angry.
Right. He says, in a fit of laughter overtook me too, and that was important. Why was it important? Because it showed what? He could.
He was tough.
He was tough. He could take it. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say
That's a shift, by the way. I like the way you point out that shift. Excuse me.
like his attitude towards it is he has to like laugh off this pain because he's like coming from a different place and he's like learning all the new customs and
Yeah.
like I don't know where they're, or yeah, they're in America, but so like he doesn't like the custom is like it's sad, but like most of the time you're gonna laugh before you ask if they're okay, and that's kind of what happened. And so then he had to pretend like it was all fine.
Yeah, here in America, we laugh when people get hurt.
I mean, for like little boys, like something like that, like they're most likely gonna laugh.
Does it even say how little he was? It doesn't, but
I mean,
I think he is little. I just don't know specifically.
Yeah, I just assumed.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna add on that, but it seemed like after he got hit in the head and got back up, it seemed like he started to enjoy what he was doing. Because before he was like just daydreaming.
Because what happened immediately after he started laughing? And you mentioned to it, you kind of mentioned it, both of you, but what happened immediately?
start playing again.
Before that?
Someone asked how it was.
Yes.
Joe Baroni, he's the guy, and I say Baroni, but there was a guy that used to play at Duke University back in the sixties, old guard, Tony Baroni. And I don't remember exactly how his name was spelled. Baroni or Barone, what does that name make you, what country does that
Philly.
name? What about O'Neill?
Ireland.
What about,
Jim Dennis.
yeah, kind of just, what about Jim Dennis and Bill Corson? What do they sound like? Just kind of American names. What's this guy's name?
Gregory, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that.
Janikian?
Eastern Bloc.
Yeah, he's an
He's
So
German.
what conclusions can you draw even from O'Neill being on the team?
DJ, Anakin,
That they recruit.
they're all from different backgrounds.
Say that again?
They all have different backgrounds.
What kind of background?
They all have different cultural backgrounds.
At some point, the O'Neills were the foreigners, and at some point, the Baronis were the foreigners, and the Janikians term now, as you say, Eastern, it sounds like an Eastern European name. I think that adds something to what he's getting at. What else can you say about yes, Lou?
Well, I think after he's hit with the ball, it's also kind of a shift from like, he's already had his most embarrassing moment already, it can only go up from there. And,
No, you can pass that.
I think he finally kind of feels like he fits in a little better because they probably all have their embarrassing moments at first.
Yeah.
And now he doesn't have to worry about
Well,
something like that happening again.
Would all of you, again, I wanna see something on paper, I think to see this, write the word shift or something around that space where the laughter, that was important. Two important things happened there. He laughed, and Joe Baroni, the leader apparently, man, he stung that ball, didn't he? You know, he seems like he's the leader. He said, "Are you okay?" And that meant he was one of them, yes. Ellen.
I think that the point of the title, How I Learned English, is both that you learn English through like other boys just talking in baseball kind of, and then also the like more symbolic meaning, I guess, is that he just was able to pick it up, and even though he messed up like with the my shin instead of my forehead, he was able to figure it out eventually.
Didn't sound like that he got any better at playing baseball, but that's not the title of the poem. The title is poem, How I Learned English. And I noticed none of you, and I think this is again, having a sort of radar focused on diction. Did you not notice the slang? You know, we talk about low elevated diction, there's a lot of low diction here.
He says we're talking it up.
Talking it up. That's an idiom. What else did you notice? Like, kind of like, you ever played baseball? I mean, you wouldn't know this if you're sitting in the stands, but have you ever played baseball?
Yeah.
The infield can't keep their mouth shut. That guy on second base is like, come on, better, come on, hum it in there, and they're just running their mouths the whole time. And it's maybe trying to confuse the batter, not so much that, it's just, I think baseball players are hyper, they're waiting, there's always a lot of waiting. But that's the sound of baseball. If you've ever played any of it, it's these guys at third base just running their mouth the whole time, and it's part of the music, it's part of the soundtrack of a baseball game. Then you have that crack, and nothing. If you're walking and you hear a crack, it's a baseball bat, aluminum bat. Then nothing. Then all of a sudden the crowd erupts. That's just an interesting sport.
Flips back.
Yeah.
Stares
What
out
else?
at you.
What other slang did you notice? Did you pick up some?
Pop up?
Nate?
Oh.
Well, pop up, sure. This is the language, and Clay drew our attention to it earlier. What are some of the other language he learned from baseball? And you mentioned it. You just pick it up. You didn't go to a class to learn it. You just played baseball and you learned it, or you went to school and you learned it. That's how you learned English. Yeah.
Yours is take it.
Yeah, he even points that out. That those particular, it's yours, and he says, that's what you say. If you're in the outfield, you communicate. I got it. It's yours. You take it. Notice he's not saying I got it. That's one of the things. He doesn't want it. What happens when he goes after it, hits him on the head.
Mhm.
We're not done though. There's some other things we need to say, Lily.
Flies, pop-ups, and filters.
Right. All this is, if you were writing about this and trying to connect the diction to the title and the theme, it's about learning English. And this is the English that he learned. All these baseball terminology. He stung it. I love that verb. These are the words that the boys used on the field. And he started using them.
I was just say hum baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
understand what that was.
I don't think we taught him that.
Oh, yeah. That sounds very familiar, not having played a lot of baseball, but, if you hum it in there, you just throw it, if you're the pitcher. I could mean other things, but it's one of those words that could refer to a lot of things. We're not done. I saw another important shift. You've got to read carefully. That's what I keep telling you. You got to read closely. I'll give you a little clue. It happens right above the laughing part. Well, no, it doesn't happen above that. It happens when he starts laughing, right above that. It's that stanza right above that. An important shift.
When he's just in the worst pain of his life.
Well, but where's the shift? And you got to look at the language.
And
My
everyone
forehead
peeled
would-
away from it.
What?
And everyone peeled away from it.
Well, yeah, that's important. That's what the laughter did at first. It put him at a distance. It put him as the object of the laughter. We've all said that. But then what does he say?
When they say Sheridan.
Yeah, that's true, yes.
My forehead with a thud.
And it was all of us riding on the ground together.
Tell me the shift.
It was from like he was the outside, now he's with the group.
Exactly. He uses the word us. And there we were. It's a really important shift from notice all the times he said and me, but not there. He says, and there we were, all of us riding on the ground. He's one of them. And so very important. That's why I love that clue, that tool to look for. Yeah.
May I go to the restroom?
Yeah, give me just a minute. We're almost done with this. Other things you can say about it. Remember the title. Remember the names. We've connected that. Yeah.
Well, I just thought maybe the reason why he's so out of it and isn't paying attention is because he just got off a plane, and if he's coming from far away, he could be tired and jet lagged, and maybe that's why he's so out of it, because he's been traveling for so long.
And I think it's not just a physical thing. I think it is a cultural thing. Wherever he's from, they're not playing baseball. They're not playing baseball in Czechoslovakia or East Germany or whatever it was back in those days. So I think you're right. It's a geographical but also a cultural gap. That baseball is bridging. You had something to say, David. I thought a minute ago. You saw your hand up. Okay. Yeah. Other.
Well, to add on to that, it kind of shows that, one says after he got off the plane, his notions of baseball and America were growing fuzzier, and so that's
today, these names would be Latin American, these names would be Spanish, Hispanic. You know, this kind of is able to put it in perspective. We don't have immigrants from Czechoslovakia much anymore. We don't notice the ones from Ireland or the ones from Italy. Those people have been so much a part of America that those names are American names now. But the names kind of, I'm thinking post-World War II. We don't know that for sure, and but this is a story and poem about culture and about the power, in this case, of baseball. You notice anything about the natural imagery? Maybe I just read a lot about baseball. It was an empty lot ringed by elms and fir and honeysuckle. Then at the end of that, he says, in the field, a blue sky above them, tipped with cirrus. And it was that word, and I don't want to make too much of it, but it was a buckskin jacket. I'm not quite sure what that was, but it sounds like Davy Crockett to me. It harkens back. It's Bill Corson's in the buckskin. It's almost like Bill Corbin, Natty Bumppo of the leather stocking tales of the 1800s. You know, these are things you need to pick up on. But you notice about the baseball? I mean, about the nature. Anything you could make of that? I mean, I've never played much baseball, but there's no more natural sport because it takes place in fields. Been playing it for 150 years. Americans have.
No.
It's in
That's not
fields.
sport.
It's near streams, under a brilliant sky. You know, it's all, and that reminds me of what we saw ourselves one time. Americans were a country of promise because we had all this natural land. Czechoslovakia is not that big. You know, we have a lot. So I just wanted you to note that. Any last words? Just before we go to this next one, which you're going to do on your own, would you write a sentence? I wrote mine here. Would you sort of, this would be your thesis, would be part of your thesis. You don't have a prompt. I'm just asking you to write a word, a sentence, one sentence that states the meaning of this poem.
These people talk just as much trash in baseball as you do in soccer.
I mean, every sport does.
Yeah.
Nate does not talk trash, Tim talks trash.
This is
But
You do not believe.
in baseball, it's just kind of, they
It's just a
started,
thing,
and they
it's-
started it, I think.
Yeah. It's hard to do it in soccer, I guess, since you're running back and forth. Kind of not next to somebody, like in baseball, kind of standing there. You're like, there's not much to do on soccer, running back and forth. And just, I mean, if you're talking, then you probably can't breathe because of all that running.
Yeah, well, baseball, you're standing there. You
Yeah.
notice about sports, he said he was crouching, low, something, what did he say? He's
Crouching low.
I was thinking, every sport I can think of, that's the ready position. Think about a tennis player, shouldn't stand up on the back line. Why is he bending over? You know, it's football, I can understand it, because you're trying to get lower. Basketball, you're bringing the ball up.
A goalie, it's not too.
You always get low. There's something about, you're out of position if you're like this. Now you're in position, your feet go out, you're ready for anything. You go up, you can go down, you can front, back. A beautiful thing. So turn to the lanyard. Do you know what a lanyard is?
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna get somebody to read it. I want you to do what we just did. I want something for every one of these. I want the title, I want another paraphrase, maybe a summary, just a line or something like we did at the end. The connotation, with the attitude, tone, I can't even remember what they are. The S, what's the S? Symbols, right? Is that symbol? Shift, that's the one I like the best. So, and then one is theme and one is the title again. I want you to mention that or address that, and volunteers for I pick one of you lucky people. Very good. I appreciate that. Rollins is gonna take the Lanyard by Billy Collins. These are all modern. Billy Collins, as far as I know, is still living. I don't know that for sure.
Okay. The other day, I was ricocheting, is that what that?
Yeah.
Ricocheting slowly off the blue walls of this room, moving as if underwater from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor. When I found myself in the L section of the dictionary, where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly. A past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep
Adirondack.
Adirondack
Up there in
lake,
New York.
learning how to braid long, thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift for my mother. I had never seen anyone use a lanyard or wear one, if that's what you did with them, but that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted spoons of medicine to my lips, laid cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light, and taught me to walk and swim, and I, in turn, presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs and bones and teeth, and 2 clear eyes to read the word, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here, I wish to say to her now, is a smaller gift, not the worn truth. That you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the 2-tone lanyard from my hand, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even.
It gets me. If any of you have mothers, and you all do, that's me. I'm the guy with the lanyard. Let's see what you can do with it. I want something for every one, just for the sake of the exercise. Okay, good. Looks like most of you are finished, or, it's literally, I hope you feel this way, the thing you could look at it for 30 minutes and keep going. I mean, I've looked at it for 2 or 3 years, so, you know, you see things,
Maybe not that long,
not continually, I'll admit, for 2 or 3 years, but over a period of 2 or 3 years. Who would like to, again, just any of the things on the board, that's what I'd like to look at, yes?
The title, instead of just being like a lanyard, it is the lanyard.
Oh, good.
Like the lanyard has some sentimental meaning.
Good.
To Billy Collins. And with the line in the second to last stanza that says, "I wish to say to her now," I kind of think that his mother is, I don't wanna say dead because that's not, but I kind of get that feeling from it. Like
Yeah.
he found the lanyard in like a box of her belongings.
Maybe so.
And remembers, oh yeah, I gave this to her, and now that he's thinking about all that she's done, he kind of realizes this wasn't enough to thank her,
Mhm.
but at the time, at least he did thank her for something.
And you're right, I wish has a lot of ideas behind it, like, why not? If he could have said, he would've, he wouldn't say, I wish
Yeah.
I could say it, it's like he can't say it. Yeah,
One shift, so, that I saw is in the first line in the very last stanza, that you can never repay your mother. Before he would, like, she was, giving him everything, but then he gave her a lanyard, but then he kind of realizes that you can never repay your mother, but then there's another shift, down, 3 lines down, I was sure as a boy it could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even. So he shifts again, even though you can never repay her, she will love if you give her something and give her a gift and appreciate her.
Yeah, I like that. It is a shift from, this is what happened, to now his admission. He's sort of concluding in several ways. He's tying it up for us. Jessica.
Well, kind of going back to the title of the lanyard, so at the last stanza, it says the two-toned lanyard. So I think that the fact that he like specifically says it's two-tone symbolizes that it's probably like the two colors symbolize the son and the mother and their close relationship because it's like woven together. And I think like that kind of goes with what Clayton said about how like he wished he could have done something, and then looking at it back at like maybe their close relationship, and yeah.
And I like to use the word weave, which would be a metaphor, right? He literally wove the lanyard. What was she weaving?
Maybe like him throughout his life.
Yeah, his character, his personality, their relationship, Lily, and then.
Going off of that, she did like weave his life together, and if you look at the third line, it's like moving as if underwater from typewriter to piano, and then you go all the way down, and it says, and she taught me to walk and swim. So now he's swimming, but the only reason he can swim, or in this case, he's obviously working on something, the only reason he can work is because she's the one that taught him, how to do that. So
Mhm. Very
that's
good.
the only reason he's in this position, able to like have a piano and typewriter and all this stuff is because she's provided it for him.
Very good. So we've talked about shifts, we've talked about the connotation of things like the lanyard, yes. Yeah. The attitude. Do you notice another way that he creates the meaning, any technique he uses? Can you identify that technique? I think Owen was kind of getting to it. I think it was you. What did she do for me, and what did I do? What's always the difference between what he says about her and what he says about himself? She gave me life milk from her breast, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed, she lifted, she laid, she led, she taught, and I gave her a lanyard. You know, how would you describe, what's he doing there?
He's kind of showing that like throughout his life he didn't really do anything other than give that lanyard.
And
That's
it's
really
so
the only thing that he's done.
and it's so short. He elaborates on what she does because there's something to elaborate about. I just gave her a lanyard. He doesn't try to make it bigger than it is. He just states a really short, simple sentence. I gave her a lanyard. And that contrast highlights the difference. Somebody else had your hand up. We're running out of time, but so contrast, repetition, we're not ready to go yet. I would like before we leave, I've never read the book, I don't plan to. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly. There's a famous book by Marcel Proust, who was a French writer, Remembrance of Things Past. That's from Ecclesiastes.
Why don't you plan on reading it?
I'm not gonna read it. I said, I don't plan to read it. It's just, too many other books I know about. I think it's long, and I think it's sort of a stream of consciousness, and I'm not sure I'd have the patience for it. I did buy Ulysses, which is a big novel. Other people say the greatest novel written in the 20th century. Finally bought it. It takes place in one day. It's about 500 pages. I'm just not sure I want to get into that kind of thing, but it's a great book. I'm supposed to, one of my goals. Would you write down before we leave here, what is the meaning of this poem? Like just pulling together. You're not coming up with new stuff. You're pulling together what we've said. I haven't heard anything that wasn't pretty much on target. So you're just drawing together in one sentence what you think the meaning of the poem is. Everybody do it. I want you to do it. We just got a minute. Leave here at 1. So write a sentence. maybe it's my age and the number of years I've done this, but I think, I remember math teachers just seemed to love solving the math problem, whatever it was. You could see them up there, and they were just into it, and I think, wow, to be like that would be great, you know? That's how I feel about poems. I feel like it's almost like a problem that I'm trying to solve, and it's enjoyable to get to the meaning